Yo, what's up guys? I think everyone is familiar right now with Leah. She's a speed scaling nuker, well technically not fully speed scaling, but she's a speed threshold scaling nuker where if she's higher speed than the enemy, her damage will go up to 200% and then her S2 does a massive amount of damage. But with the recent balance patch, there's actually a unit that kind of does the same thing, but is an LD5. So is that a Leah 2.0? And that is Theonia. Theonia is a little bit weird for the fact where she used to have, if you have more attack than the enemy, you do 100% extra damage. If you have more speed than the enemy, you become speed scaling. And prior to this balance patch, if you have more defense than the enemy, you were also defense scaling, which resulted in her base stats having high defense, good attack, very low HP. But right now she's changed. She still has the guaranteed crit, extra damage if she's higher attack power, and extra damage if she's higher speed, plus her damage is improved by removing that defense part. Interesting thing is that she still has a very high base defense for a unit that doesn't need base defense anymore, and therefore they could actually change her base stats to simply get more attack. But let's see if her damage is actually that much improved, because I've seen a few people use this in RTA. But is it an RTA unit? Is the siege unit? Is the arena unit? Let's find out. So first of all, just to test the waters, we're using a team like this. It's not really something you would recommend to use, but it is usable out there. Where we have a Leah on best set that I can give with some decent artifacts of attack up, crit damage 2 and all of that shenanigans. We have a fight Swift over here and then a full-on Swift over there. Sure, this is not the most optimal of teams out there because, of course, you can miss your death break on the Gemini kind of things. But I do fight a team that just doesn't have any will runes just for the sake of testing. So how much damage are we looking at? We're looking at 40k cross board. Tankier unit is double 33k, so 66k, and then about like an 80-ish k is what we're seeing over here. Of course, in this thing, I can also just add in any unit I want, which is always super chill. I could copy the exact set, but we have a guaranteed crit in here, so therefore we don't need that. But just for a fair reference of seeing like, hey, how much damage is an equal set doing, I'm gonna copy the exact same set. Of course, after that, I will go for a set that's actually most optimal for her. So these will be the artifacts that I'm using. Of course, I'm using the same relic as I have on the other one, which is still my best relic out there. And then we have this for runes, which is the exact same copy of the set of that we just had on that Leah. And let's see how much more damage we're doing. So we were looking at 80k on the left, about 66k on the right, which is arguably then a more tanky unit, and therefore you deal less damage. Could also be that the speed threshold scaling wasn't fully inactive. In this case, there's no speed threshold scaling, but full-on speed scaling. So let's see how much damage we're looking. We're actually not looking at the middle, which is perfectly fine. We're going to go for 71k, which is 5k higher, and we're going to go for an 88k, which is about 8k higher. So she already does do more damage than a Leah, which is known to be one of the highest damage dealers out there. And even this without the defense break is a 32k. But keep in mind, we're adding crit where we don't need any crit. So let's actually remove this crit rate and go on the same speed and go for a full damage set. So with that, we can add a lot of attack. We're not adding that much crit damage. We're, of course, removing all of the crit rate, and then we're doing a massive amount more damage. So let's see how that does look like, because I'm expecting a good bit of damage right here, and it might even be to the point where you can simply use a team like this, but there's maybe a different version that might be a little bit better where you don't have to depend on defense break. But first, let's see how much damage are we dealing at the moment with this unit. We're dealing a 100k and 80k. So if we keep in mind that we're dealing 80k here before, that is a good bit 20k more damage. And that's a good bit of a 66 to an 81k almost over here, which is also 15k more damage, which is definitely a lot better than a Leah. But then again, do you really need to hit 100k? Not really. So let's find a way where we don't need a defense break, but we still do massive enough damage to kill things. What if we were to do this, which is very interesting, which actually would have worked with the previous setup as well, because you do buff your attack buff. So the idea behind this is you are moving first, giving the speed buff, and then also the damage amplifier. You giving the attack buff, and you moving right after, and we're not going to care about any defense break, but we're just going to full nuke. This technically also makes things a little bit easier to tune, mainly because we have an extra 35 speed increasing effect over here. Of course, with the Leah, it's easier to tune because of higher base speed. It's 17 higher base speed than this unit over here. So the tuning is, of course, a little bit more difficult, but the damage output on that Theonia thus far is seemingly a lot more. So let's see if we go for the boost and then the double boost and then this hit over here. How much damage are we dealing with that? That is on a squishy unit, 60k without defense break. On a tank unit, 45k without a defense break. That is a lot of damage coming in. Is that enough to kill everything if they're fully on shield sets and stuff? Probably not. But without that, I could definitely see this being used. So what are the common themes that people will use, Rin? Well, the thing with the Gemini and Adriana that I just did, I definitely can see people use that. This is also a version of it that can totally work. For Arena, she does have the defense lead, which is once again one of those old things for her, the same as her high-based defense, something she doesn't really need anymore. However, what would be the teams for her for Arena? You could do this same team with a Kabila over here and then have more outspeed potential. You can also totally do this with a Chiwu Galleon and then add in an Asher to give the speed buff, and therefore you have a proper nuke as well. If you want to go for 33 leads, and we're going real all out, I could see a world where you go for a Trinity plus a Greg. Of course, not everyone is going to have that Trinity and the Greg, and of course you're going to be putting in a Kabila over here, so you have the full outspeed potential. But if you don't have the Greg, you can simply add in Adriana or Croswell, and if you don't have the Trinity, you're going to be working with SMF. As simple as that. Is it therefore one of the best offenses out there? Not necessarily sure. Is it still something that's very usable and very good? Yeah, I definitely do think it's very good. However, in a lot of the Leah teams I used in the past, I was basing it off chilling. However, chilling is not that interesting for Theonia because of the crit rate in here. So because of the crit rate, I would rather go for Kabila kind of speed setup rather than the chilling, but that does mean that you probably have to be looking for an attack buff plus a speed buff in one unit, or you just have to use it for a slightly slower route. For example, the team that I did over here, Theonia could fit very well on the Zyros spot. It would definitely do more damage than the Zyros. However, Zyros does have that increased cooldown, which is very strong as well. Plus, at this point, you're just crazy overkilling anyways. Because you would be fighting any team that's slower than you and any team that's slower than you. Yeah, do you really need to do like 150k damage on those kind of things? Not necessarily. Is it funny though? Yeah, it's definitely funny in this case. The Minato will actually have potential to mess us up because of that, but doesn't really matter just for the idea of the damage. Yeah, we're already doing like 63k. I'm very certain that Theonia in this kind of state would do more or close to like 100k, but as I mentioned, is that 100k really a necessity? Maybe not as much. Is it funny though? It's definitely funny. Then the thing, you did hear me say about RTA. Is this RTA usable? Well, there's one player in particular that is very famous for his cleaves, and he's doing that with Theonia as well, which is, of course, Cabrera. Recently, he's actually been on quite a bit of a losing streak, but he's using it in about every match out there. I want to see a few matches why it's winning, but I also want to see a few matches why is it losing. So I can definitely see the vibes of losing when you have a Ragdoll against you, a Leo against you. Like, that's the hardest counter out there. But I could also definitely see the vibes where the enemy locks in double speed lead. You only have one speed lead, and then your speed lead gets lost in the process. So it is a difficult unit to use in RTA. However, it is still something he's using, and actually to a decent extent. But yeah, he's being outsped on 2 units. That's a pretty fast Gojo right there. Well, Gojo is 106 base with the 24 lead. That is decently faster than the 119 base kind of units. But in the end, he's still hovering a very high rank. And he actually went from a crazy winning streak into a crazy losing streak. So let's see some of the wins that he did make on this team. And also the big question, how much damage is it actually doing? Because he's definitely not working with any kind of shape of way of defense break. Well, the Athena could be a defense break. That's actually a thing. And Athena would probably move in front. That's a very dead unit right there. Also, he's just fast enough where his Adriana moves all the way first. How much damage are we dealing? 24k on tanky units, 32k on squishy units. That is a lot of damage coming in. Is it more the Sonya and the Athena actually murdering pretty much the whole team already before this thing even moves? Maybe a little bit. Also a fight into a Leo. Interesting that it would work into a Leo, but then again, I do see this thing over here, and there's very good odds that it's Douglas against the world. How much? No, we're actually not killing anything. Wait, how much is this gonna do on defense break? Yep, he just takes it out. He just takes it out. And now, ooh, we got the attack buff, though. The attack buff makes it hard for the Douglas, but I think it's gonna be a Douglas against the world kind of shenanigans, right? Yep, it's supposed to be. Supposed to be. Yeah, if you have a good Douglas, man, Douglas can still do a thing or two. There are definitely the odds where Douglas doesn't, but... Ooh, Rain of Stones, that could be a good bit of damage. With that attack buff, that's tricky though. That's tricky. And also, ooh, is he actually winning this? Yo, that thing is on like 1 HP like 6 times in a row, man. How the hell are you winning this? If he landed this 50-50, where it wouldn't have been... Yo, that thing is so low on HP. It's like, okay, is that a clean victory? Maybe not really. He's actually getting to fight a lot of Leos, but that does make a lot of sense because in the end, you do have the issue that if you're drafting a lot of Sonias and those kind of things and speed scalers, people are going to go for that Leo. But let's see how it does work over here. So we do get our defense break. You also move. Daniel's going to be a big issue. We do get the strip over there. How much damage are we dealing right now? 19k on a tanky unit. So it's noticeable that if you don't have the speed buff, don't have the attack buff, you're dealing a lot less damage. Well, in this case with the Leo, it wouldn't have mattered. But yeah, having the Daniels, the backup over here, plus a strong Carlos, those are definitely some nasty units as well. In the end, if we're talking bruiser-wise, there's still that defense break on the S2, which in this case was provided on itself. Once again, looking like a tricky match, though. It's not looking that clean if you ask me, but then again, Carlos is here to stay, Carlos is here to be annoying, and Carlos is getting some turns in, so Daniel did do a good bit of work, but now it's just Carlos for the cleanup, it does seem. Actually, checking these matches, a lot of matches are just straight up into Leo, where Carlos does a kind of a cleanup. But here we have one that's a little bit less of a Leo in there. So let's see how that does work out for him. He should be outspeeding that whole team. He does also have Daisy. Is Daisy his counter against the Hey Gang? I guess it is, because that is a no-touch, right? Or at least it goes through. Branding on this, which is actually a nice setup. 36 to 35k. It's like, yo, he's just murdering the whole team. That Daisy with the brand setup, it's not a defense break, but it's actually working very well for him as a cleave. Yeah, this guy is super creative with his cleave, so that's always fun to see some people just making things work. Yes, in the end, this guy has been living in Giants since the dawn of time, pretty much. So he has crazy swift runes throughout, which is very noticeable on all of those units. But then again, hey, if you're just a cleaver, you want to hold on to the cleave. If you pull a cool D5 cleave with that, it's actually a pretty fun unit right there. Doesn't need a lot of setup to actually work. Holy, that's stanky. Well, that's a Valeska, that kind of makes sense. But how much damage are we dealing on the rest? Defense break, attack buff, speed buff, RTA scenario, 73k. Damn. That is so much damage coming in. It's actually, he just fully cleaned the battlefield over there. Wow, I just want to see that again. It's like, oh, that is some proper damage. That is absolutely some proper damage right there. Is it necessarily RTA usable for everyone? I don't know. Adriana in the end, especially if you want to put it towards Will, it is a 111 base, which is not the highest thing out there. But is that an insane amount of damage on this unit? Abso-freaking-lutely. That is so freaking much damage coming in. And that's just also cool to see. I can tell you that much. His matches are not gonna take long. Like, he's probably playing all his RTA wings in like just an hour every day. Either you win super fast or you lose super fast. Final verdict on Theonia, I would say very usable unit. Would I use it myself? I think I would just make it a siege offense. I would probably put it towards 1 or 2 arena offenses. I would most likely not use it in RTA, however, but I would definitely use this unit as an upgraded version of a Leah in Siege and Arena, because she's definitely a Leah 2.0 right now. Sure, skill 1 is not as strong as the Leah, because Leah passive does also provide extra for the skill 1, but the skill 2 of a defense break if things are not fully dead is very useful though. Plus, in the end, we like big numbers. So guys, that's all for this video. Thanks a lot for watching. If you have any other comps that you like to use her in, put those in the comment section as well. Mainly for the other people that also might have her or have other ideas with her to help out each other. And see you as always in the next one. Thanks for watching. If you would like to see more guides, join the Discord and check out the content tab for the guide video archive, which contains all of the guides that you might need. Hope to see you there.